Accused of stealing, I documented my manager's casino trips. He was arrested for embezzlement. I was vindicated and rewarded. First post. Be nice. This incident occurred long ago, in 1986. I was 21 years old at that time and employed at a gas station that was linked to a particular grocery store chain in Washington state. The gas station was owned by a company that was not connected to the grocery chain, but it had locations in nearly every store. Since this was long before debit cards became commonplace, the gas station only accepted cash. We didn't even accept credit cards. Customers would arrive, fill up their gas tanks, and then approach my window to make their payment. We also sold cigarettes, but no beverages or snacks. Customers couldn't access my booth. I had been employed there for about a year when the company announced that it would be closing the location. My manager and I were offered positions at a different branch upstate, and we both agreed to transfer. We moved our families and began our new jobs, as new hires. This station was extraordinarily busy. We conducted more transactions in 8 hours than my previous location would complete in an entire week. The setup at this location was also different. Customers would enter the station through a single entrance, fill their gas tanks, and then drive forward to a single exit where the Pay Here booth was situated. There were always 2 cashiers working. Each cashier operated their own cash drawer. I should mention that there were no computers present. Closing out the cash drawer between shifts was time-consuming and tedious. We had to manually count the remaining cigarettes and the cash in the drawers. We filled out an end-of-shift report detailing the starting and ending balances. Additionally, we needed to record the gallons sold from each pump. By the end of the shift, the total gallons sold and the total cigarettes sold were supposed to match the cash balance. It is essential to note that during the entire year I worked at my previous location, I had never been off by more than 10 cents. The following morning after my first shift, the manager told me that I was short 50. Impossible, I replied. I balanced everything yesterday. He suggested that I must have taken that money after completing the paperwork. I simply looked at him and said, "No, I did not." He issued me a verbal warning and stated that if it happened again, I would be terminated and the stolen money would be deducted from my paycheck that week. In the subsequent 5 days, I quickly realized that the manager was up to something. My former manager, who was now just another employee, was also accused of theft. Another new employee faced similar accusations. I can't speak for the other individual, but I am quite confident she did nothing wrong. The long-term employees were never suspected of any wrongdoing. After some investigation, I discovered that the manager was relatively new, having been there for only about 6 months, whereas the other cashiers had been in place before him. Only the newer cashiers were being accused of theft. That location had been encountering theft problems for around 6 months, and the employee turnover was high among the new staff. On a Monday morning, I arrived at work at 6 a.m., only to be informed that I was being terminated for cause. The manager accused me of taking $500 from my drawer the previous Friday. He claimed he had only discovered it that morning, despite having worked on Saturday and Sunday. I acknowledged his accusations and left. I felt quite angry, and instead of heading home, I parked in the grocery store's parking lot to observe the gas station. I realized that at exactly 9 a.m., he would retrieve the cash from the safe to make the weekend deposit. At 9 a.m., he exited the gas station and headed for the bank. However, instead of entering the bank, he walked into the Indian betting parlor next door. It wasn't a traditional casino as we think of today, but more of a wagering establishment for races. It did have slot machines, but no card tables. I thought to myself, well, this is interesting. He emerged from the betting parlor precisely at 10 a.m., walked to the bank, conducted his business, and then returned to the gas station. I formulated a plan as I returned home. Every morning, I followed him from the gas station to the betting parlor. I captured a photo of him leaving and another as he entered the bank and walked into the betting parlor. I took pictures of him exiting and then returning to the bank. I continued this for 5 consecutive days, and he even went there on Saturday. On the 3rd day, my former manager was dismissed for allegedly stealing $150. I developed the film. Since digital cameras weren't available back then, noted the times and dates on the back of each picture, and then contacted the main office of the gas company. Even though it was after 5 p.m., I hoped someone would be available, and thankfully they were. I spoke with a woman, explained my situation, and she informed me that she knew exactly whom I should talk to and then transferred me. By a stroke of luck, she connected me with none other than the president and chief executive officer of the company. I recounted my story to him and asserted that I had not stolen from his company and could prove who actually did. He recorded my information and assured me that he would get back to me. I was skeptical, thinking to myself, yeah, right? The next morning, I went to the station to conduct my usual observation of the manager. At 9 a.m., he departed for the bank. At 10 a.m., he came out. At that moment, two serious-looking gentlemen approached him. One of them pulled out his wallet and showed him something while the other spoke to him. The manager turned pale and took a step back. Before I knew it, he was being escorted to a car I hadn't noticed, and they drove away. I lost sight of them at a traffic signal, so I returned to the station. They all returned about 5 minutes later, and shortly thereafter, a police cruiser arrived. The officer had a conversation with the stern gentleman and proceeded to place the manager in handcuffs. The other man said nothing but glared angrily at the manager. The president called me later that afternoon and informed me that the manager had been arrested for embezzlement. It turned out that he had managed to steal around $5,000 in 6 months. He would take the store cash to the betting parlor and gamble with it. If he won, he would make the usual bank deposit. If he lost, he would still make the deposit, but would note in his records that we had been short the day before. The CEO had already been focusing on that location due to the theft issues and high turnover rate, but my information helped them understand what had been happening. I was thanked and sent a generous check as a reward. My former manager was offered the manager's position, and I was offered my previous job back. I declined because I had already found another job that I preferred, and that paid better. The gambling manager received a 1-year prison sentence and was mandated to attend counseling for his gambling addiction. His wife divorced him and took their 3 children to California. His house was foreclosed, and he ended up in a homeless shelter. Do not accuse me of stealing. I will take my revenge. Update, thank you for the likes and awards. Update 2, this was my first post, and I truly did not anticipate all the recognition. Thank you. Story 2. Ayo. My roommate refuses to do any of his agreed responsibilities. Very minor NSFW. Hello everyone. I apologize in advance for the length of this message. I will do my best to keep it concise while including all the details I believe are significant. This is an anonymous post. I regret any lack of coherence. I have not slept well and am experiencing a migraine. I am a 21-year-old female living with my boyfriend, who is 25 years old, another roommate, and 2 friends of ours, who are married and about the same age as my boyfriend, along with their child. The focus of this message is on the married man in the household. For the sake of clarity, I will refer to the male roommate as Mike and the female roommate as Jess. We have a spacious house that fortunately accommodates all 6 of us, along with our pets. However, with 6 individuals and several animals, the place can get messy quickly. Shortly after moving in together in June, we decided to establish a chore list to help manage household tasks. Initially, the chores were evenly distributed. Each person was assigned approximately 2 main responsibilities each day, with 2 designated days off throughout the week. The chores were agreed upon by everyone and were considered fairly balanced. The upstairs area, which includes their bedroom, bathroom, desks, and shared living space, essentially a second living room, is prioritized by our roommates. The downstairs primarily belongs to my boyfriend and me, since it contains our bedroom, his office, and the downstairs living room. The shared responsibilities here are limited to the kitchen and dining room, which we all use equally. The child's bedroom is an exception because it is also located downstairs, and either Jess or the child tends to its upkeep based on the tasks assigned. This arrangement functioned well for perhaps a month. While we all slacked off at times, I initially agreed that it wasn't solely one person failing to fulfill their tasks. However, Mike gradually began claiming that his wife was unwilling to assist him with his share. Now, she manages all her chores, looks after their 2 cats and their child, and also completes all of Mike's tasks. She frequently neglects showers and meals, even though she knows she should not, to prioritize the needs of her child and husband. The excuses from Mike started with complaints about how he disliked the kitchen setup for putting dishes away. Then he claimed there were too many dishes in the sink and that it was getting late, so he wouldn't do them after spending the day playing video games. Eventually, he settled on doing only specific chores. Now, he unloads the dishwasher only once a week, but consistently orders takeout to avoid dealing with the dishes. While some of these excuses are understandable occasionally, making them daily has become excessive. Each meal we prepare, he carries the food upstairs to his desk and steadfastly refuses to bring it back down unless pressured by everyone, or when the dishes pile up to the point of having no clean dishes left. He orders takeout at least 5 times a week, even late at night, leaving greasy trash on his desk, floors, and in his bedroom. Furthermore, he went so far as to buy paper plates to eliminate the need to bring any items downstairs. Now he leaves them wherever he prefers upstairs or tosses them in the bathroom trash. On one occasion, he piled up dishes on our other roommate's recliner until a cat knocked them over, creating a messy situation. Additionally, their cats have not been trained to leave food and drinks alone and frequently knock over his half-full sodas or dirty paper plates onto the carpets upstairs. Jess is usually the one who cleans it up later, as Mike either fails to notice or does not care enough to address it. In addition to the disarray upstairs, the downstairs is often just as chaotic, despite the amount of cleaning my boyfriend and I undertake. The upstairs living room is mostly unused, aside from the cats napping on the couch, and the table surfaces are cluttered with trash. The dining room often serves as a game night table, which Jess and I typically clean up after we play. However, they often engage in Magic. The Gathering, a game I do not play, and when they finish, my boyfriend puts his decks away in the bedroom or his office. Jess carries hers back upstairs, while unfortunately, Mike leaves his out on the table, where the cats or child often play with them, sometimes damaging them. He becomes furious with the rest of us, even though cleaning up after them is not our responsibility. When they moved in, they transitioned from an apartment in a neighboring town in June 2024. Now, as we enter February 2025, 90 of their belongings remain piled in the garage, including countless empty and full boxes, bags of clothes, furniture, both old and new, and various junk. There is no longer any walking space in there, making it impossible to access our deep freezer. Their cats have defecated in that space, which has yet to be cleaned up months later. Each day he returns home from work, he removes his shoes and socks, tossing them wherever he pleases downstairs, along with his work shirt and belt on most days. Jess cleans up after him, or I at least place the items on the steps as a gentle reminder. Most recently, my mother, who has visited us before, reprimanded us younger adults over the phone for being too immature and constantly arguing about things, as she overheard during a call she made for other reasons. While I believe my mother's remarks were somewhat harsh, I understand her perspective, given that we can be stubborn. After the conversation, Mike erupted at me, declaring my mother a fool and stating she should mind her own business because she has no idea what she's talking about. The reprimand from my mother was aimed at all of us, so Mike was not directly targeted, yet he was the only one who reacted with anger. Less than 30 minutes later, we attempted to have a mature discussion about how we could improve and hold each other accountable moving forward. However, Mike completely disregarded the actual issues, dismissed Jess and me when we voiced our feelings, and proceeded to pull out his phone to show us a pornographic video sent by a friend, with the child present in the room mainly because we had no other proper supervision at that moment. We immediately abandoned the conversation and left because that behavior exemplified the immaturity my mother had just criticized, and we did not want the child to accidentally see something inappropriate. Less than an hour later, while I was preparing dinner, Mike erupted again about the conversation and informed Jess and me that he would no longer do any chores whatsoever. It has now been a full week since he made that statement, and he has only vacuumed upstairs yesterday when asked, cleaning just a 3-foot area in front of the litter box because it felt unpleasant under his feet. The rest was deemed acceptable, so while that's something, it's not really what was requested. Am I overreacting in wanting him to leave? Jess and the child are fine, and I understand that I can't kick Mike out while ensuring Jess and the child remain without risking their separation. But what should I do? My boyfriend and I have been searching for places to move, but Mike seems to think he is coming along with us, despite our repeated assertions that unless his behavior changes, we do not wish to live with him again. Story 3. I am 20. Don't know if my long-distance relationship, F20, is still worth being in. How do I navigate this? Hello, everyone. I genuinely cannot believe that I am the one with a throwaway account preparing to share here. Setting that aside, I am reaching out because my high school sweetheart, with whom I have had an on and off relationship, is leading me to reconsider whether I should continue in this relationship. For clarification, our 2 previous breakups were truly over trivial high school matters, mostly peer pressure, and toward the conclusion of our senior year, we came to the mutual understanding that we still had feelings for each other and agreed that the 3rd time is the last time. Naturally, I recognize that I will likely encounter the usual criticism here on Reddit suggesting that a relationship like this isn't likely to endure, and I apologize for being somewhat naive, I genuinely believe that our relationship is unique. Nothing about our relationship has been conventional, except for our shared belief in traditional relationship values. She is someone I know cares about me deeply, yet she tends to keep her feelings bottled up inside. Now addressing the core issues, we have faced a series of challenges beginning last fall, which have continued to impact our relationship even now. During the fall, I quit using nicotine, and according to my girlfriend, I became somewhat harsh and generally less enjoyable to be around. Consequently, she claims that I pushed her away, which in the context of a long-distance relationship meant she frequently chose to spend time with her friends at school instead. Furthermore, I had been struggling with extended bouts of depression since early last spring, which became noticeably worse when I began to realize that some of my friends were less than sincere. Ultimately, she involved my parents in the matter, stating that it had become too much for her and overwhelming to cope with. I understand that my feelings were not her issues to confront. However, I had believed that support would look a bit different than getting redirected to the people I wished to worry about me the least. Regardless of all this, I committed myself to investing a considerable amount of effort into our relationship, aiming to ensure she felt an abundance of positivity radiating from her phone's screen. I also made a point to do this when we were together for the winter, and everything seemed great, but if I made even a minor comment or mistake, she would practically shut down and turn her back on me, denying that any issue existed. For me, I take pride in serving as an emotional support system, so being dismissed as if nothing was amiss, even though it clearly was as soon as I left her home, truly hurt. When I spoke with my dad about this situation, he reassured me that this behavior is not unusual for girlfriends and advised me to let things unfold. While I do not wish to summarize this entire post based on just 2 significant incidents, the first occurred on New Year's Eve. We had just engaged in a minor argument 2 nights earlier, and she was under the impression that I was upset enough to not want to go out with her. I was not. In an effort to reconcile, she planned a wonderful dinner for us, offering to cover the cost of the meal to make up for things and encourage me to leave the house. We had a delightful time, enjoyed excellent food, but because it was a bit costly, I felt it necessary to offer to split the bill to avoid placing the entire financial burden on her. We then experienced an awkward moment until she informed me that she had forgotten to bring any form of payment, resulting in me having to cover the entire bill. Once we got back into the car, she viewed this as a great expression of love, while I felt like I had just been taken advantage of for an 80 dinner. This deeply troubled me. How could someone I care for put me in this position? Even more frustrating, when I later brought up the issue during the week, it escalated into a more significant controversy than I anticipated, as it turned out that it's the man's responsibility to make a romantic gesture like that on New Year's. Although that may not have been the exact phrasing, I felt as though I was being continuously manipulated into understanding this as a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate my affection for her. There is a bit more to this incident, but it is honestly less relevant than the following situation. Returning to school for the spring semester, I felt quite down due to the realization that my friends do not care for me as much as I care for them, which coincided perfectly with my birthday week after classes began. As a surprise, my girlfriend chose to visit my school as a birthday gift, presenting me with a 50 gift card to use for dinner between us. While I do not wish to emphasize monetary values, whenever she visits, I consistently take her out to places other than the dining halls, often spending a few $100s in the process. Though the gesture was endearing and indicated that she cared to some extent, I found myself spending my birthday in a net negative financial situation, although I have been informed that I tend to focus too much on money. After returning to school, she mentioned that she would spend more time with her friends to compensate for the prior weekend we spent together, which I found entirely reasonable. However, things escalated from there. We continually made plans that were often canceled, or I would be asked, "Is it okay if I go out with to XXX instead?" I strive to remain open and flexible in order to avoid restricting my significant other, but eventually, I realized that I could not recall a single occasion where we made plans that were actually executed. Although it is only the end of February, I feel emotionally depleted, and I have communicated this to her. The final straw occurred on Valentine's Day, when she arrived 45 minutes late to our online date, where we had planned to surprise each other by ordering our favorite foods. When I playfully suggested what we might order, she explained that she had eaten late and was no longer hungry, but I could proceed to eat while she got ready to go out to the bar later, which we had previously agreed upon, leaving us with only about 3 hours to genuinely converse. Since then, we have been on a break without labels, and I find myself utterly uncertain about what to do next. We have discussed our commitment to being there for one another regardless of the circumstances, and we have both expressed the belief that we are meant to be eventually, among other things. Right now, I feel lost and am unsure about the best course of action. I have been told I possess a high degree of emotional maturity, so I wish to approach this rationally, but I also desire happiness as a result of my decisions. I am unsure if anyone else could bring me as much joy as she does, but I certainly do not want to jeopardize everything either. Any guidance would be appreciated. In summary, my high school sweetheart and I have experienced diminishing connections, allegedly due to my quitting nicotine. After addressing what I believe to be the problems, I still feel unfulfilled and uncertain regarding the future of our relationship, primarily due to her insufficient reciprocation of energy toward it. Any advice on how to navigate this situation, especially as I am aware that I am young and naive, would be incredibly beneficial. I feel as though I have no one to confide in regarding this matter for a variety of reasons. Thank you all. Story 4. Am I the a-hole for not making my cousin a bridesmaid? My wedding took place well over a year ago. Since then, my cousin Bianca and I have communicated very little because she is upset with me for not including her as a bridesmaid at my wedding, despite her having made me one for her wedding 2 years earlier. To provide some context, Bianca and I are close in age and share a mutual group of friends with whom we typically socialize. We rarely interact outside this group, as she does not attend family gatherings or spend time with our other cousins. Given that she is not particularly close to our side of the family due to her parents' divorce during her childhood, I am related to her through her father. However, she did make an exception for me since we share the same friends, making her feel more at ease with me than with the rest of her cousins from her father's side. During her wedding, she included all her cousins as bridesmaids, even inviting 2 from her father's side along with me. Leading up to Bianca's wedding, we did not receive any formal proposal as bridesmaids. We were simply added to a group chat. My other 2 cousins assumed it was primarily for participating in dances, as that was the main topic being discussed. Eventually, it became evident that we were indeed all bridesmaids, and measurements were taken for matching dresses. My wedding occurred 2 years after Bianca's. A lot had taken place during the intervening years. 6 months before my wedding, Bianca returned to our home country for a visit. I had arranged for custom wedding invitations to be made there, and since Bianca was in that location, I asked her if she could bring a few back for me. She agreed, which was a significant relief. However, toward the end of her trip, I received a call from Bianca's mother, informing me that Bianca could not bring the invitations back as they were not going straight to the United States and would be visiting other places. I wondered why Bianca didn't communicate this to me herself initially. I realized she was not required to do this favor, but it upset me that she had agreed and then had her mother retract the offer. This made me feel that she was not someone I could rely on. I have come to terms with the fact that she views me more as a friend than as family. For instance, at a gathering with friends, she asked someone to take a picture of her and her family, which included her maternal cousin, her brother-in-law's fiancé, and her husband's cousin's girlfriend. I was not invited to join the picture, which emphasized our blood relation's lack of significance. This moment certainly hurt my feelings. Even from a friendship standpoint, she wasn't particularly supportive. I had been facing bullying from other girls and was feeling depressed. I reached out to Bianca to talk about these issues, but she was too preoccupied to lend me her time. That's fine. I don't expect anyone to drop everything for me when I'm in need, but she never followed up or checked on me afterward, which left me feeling abandoned. I never wanted to compete for her attention. I simply wished she could find a balance. It was these little incidents that led to my decision. I felt overlooked both as a friend and as family, which made me question our relationship. The bridesmaids I chose were those I hold dear, who had supported me during difficult times. Sadly, Bianca was not among them. To be fair, I did not include any of my cousins as bridesmaids. My reasoning was that family automatically belongs to the wedding party and does not need an official title. My immediate family tends not to be very inclusive with my friends, so elevating them as bridesmaids was my method of making them feel included in the wedding. There was no significant distinction between them, apart from wearing the same color at the wedding. My bridesmaids did not have a separate entrance, were not listed on our wedding website, nor did they stand with me at the altar. We simply took some photos together. I did choose Miranda, a mutual friend of Bianca's from our friend group, as a bridesmaid because we had grown close over the years. She has always checked in on me and asked how she could assist with the wedding. This may have contributed to the existing tension. When Miranda inquired whether I was making Bianca a bridesmaid, I clarified that I was reserving that role for my friends since she was family and already part of the wedding party. Miranda suggested I should have a conversation with Bianca about it, as Bianca had reached out to her expressing her expectation of receiving a bridesmaid proposal. Nevertheless, I did not feel the need to justify my choices, as it was my wedding. My bridal shower occurred a month before my wedding. A significant number of my bridesmaids could not attend, as they lived out of state. Since I had wanted the shower, I ended up planning it myself, and a few people, including Bianca, who offered to assist were added to a group chat to help me coordinate. Bianca volunteered to bring plates, cups, and utensils. When I learned that she had fallen ill a day or two before the shower, I called to check on her. I told her not to worry about bringing anything, and I would handle it myself. However, she insisted on bringing the items, not wanting to miss the shower. Not wanting her to feel worse, I allowed it. On the day of the shower, everything was prepared, and guests were ready to eat. However, Bianca had yet to arrive with the essentials she had promised. While I tried to be understanding of her illness, she has a reputation for being late. Although I had the option to pick up the items myself, I let her handle it since she had insisted. She eventually arrived with them, but I disliked feeling unprepared for something so straightforward, and this minor issue became unnecessarily stressful for me. She left shortly after dropping off the essentials because she was still not feeling well. 2 weeks before my wedding, we held a dance practice at Bianca's house with our 2 cousins. I presented each of the 3 girls with a gift bag of goodies as a token of gratitude for their help. I specifically said, "I know I didn't officially make you all bridesmaids, but that is understood since you are family." I suppose Bianca interpreted this as a bridesmaid proposal since she expressed her excitement and shared a picture of it on social media. I realized later that the slippers I included, which had bridesmaid written on them, could have been misleading. The other 2 cousins understood my intentions and were fine with it, which led me to question why Bianca did not. I had provided those gifts because each of the girls had contributed to my wedding preparations in their unique ways, such as Bianca waking up early one morning to do my makeup. I wanted to acknowledge her efforts. I find it confusing that she would assume I was giving a bridesmaid proposal just 2 weeks before the wedding, while the other girls received their proposals 6 months earlier. I would think she might have noticed that and sought clarification from me. On the day of the wedding, she discovered that she was not a bridesmaid when she saw my bridesmaids wearing the same color and taking photos together. I understand how upsetting that could be, but I thought she was already aware that she was not included as a bridesmaid. From the start, I knew she would not be reliable as a bridesmaid, considering her tendency to be late and her poor communication skills. I believed I was sidestepping potential drama by not including her as a bridesmaid, but it escalated into this situation instead. Am I the antagonist for not making her a bridesmaid and failing to clarify my reasoning to her? Story 5. I hate my elementary school teacher. If I ever have children in the future, I will ensure that I teach them to express themselves and stand up for their rights from the age of 3. I do not want them to end up like their mother, weak, timid, and full of anxiety. Even at 17 years old, the memory of my elementary school teacher continues to haunt me. My middle school and high school teachers were committed and gracious. They were adequate, but my elementary school teacher was a nightmare. I was terrified of facing this woman. She was a truly dreadful person. This teacher was a relative of one of my cousins. Complicated, isn't it? I entered her class when I was 7 years old. From the very start, she forced me into a state of constant distress. I recall one instance when I was working on an assignment and accidentally wrote the letter C instead of CH. Do you know what happened? She grabbed my ear from behind and twisted it as if she were trying to tighten a bolt. I nearly screamed in the middle of the classroom. When she walked away, I desperately wanted to cry, but since many of my classmates had faced similar treatment, I could only stifle my tears. That was not the only time I experienced this. My ears were pinched countless times, just like those of many other students. She instilled an overwhelming fear in us to our very core. Furthermore, she was an unjust individual. I realized this only later. At that time, I excelled in foreign languages, and some of my classmates were top performers in other subjects, but she never showed favoritism towards any of us. She was always gentle with a girl named N. That child was not particularly remarkable academically, but she had beautiful handwriting. We never witnessed her being reprimanded. The teacher even allowed her to participate in a drawing contest, despite the presence of more talented students. At the time, I did not dare to think much about it, but now I understand it was because Entitledparents' family was quite affluent. When I was 9 years old, my parents enrolled me in martial arts classes, which strengthened my limbs. During a school festival, she selected me to join a dance team of 5 members. I attempted to explain that I was no longer suited for dancing, but she kept insisting until I had no other option but to comply. I had to forego martial arts classes for an entire week, putting all my efforts into practicing dance while missing an essential test at my training center. Dancing required elegance, like floating clouds, which was challenging for me. My movements were rather awkward. As the performance day approached, I had memorized all the steps, though they were not flawless. During a rehearsal, while I was bending down for a move, she unexpectedly slapped my backside, almost causing me to lose my balance. She remarked that my movements were too stiff and suggested that I leave the team to make way for another student. I left school that evening in shock, my mind racing with endless thoughts. I had sacrificed my martial arts training, only to be so effortlessly discarded. If she was dissatisfied, why not let me go from the start? Why wait until merely 3 days before the performance to abandon me? More than a week of effort was thrown away. I could not stop crying on my way home. I quit martial arts that day, but I plan to return to it when I am 19. As for performing on stage again, never. When I was unwell or injured, she showed no concern, despite her responsibilities as a teacher. On one occasion, I had a loose tooth that could not be pulled yet, causing me intense pain. My pain threshold was extremely low. I writhed in agony, to the point of developing a fever, but instead of taking me to the school nurse, she coldly told me I was being dramatic, acting like a lunatic, and ordered me to be quiet. She was not only cruel to me, she was also ruthless toward my cousin, who was actually her nephew by marriage, not her biological nephew, just to clarify. I did not particularly like this cousin, but I could not deny that he was bullied by his own teacher relative. He excelled in mathematics, but when he stumbled on a basic problem, she mocked him, claiming he was a genius lost in the clouds, saying he could only handle advanced math but struggled with simple calculations. She often ridiculed him, and when she made him cry, she encouraged the entire class to join in, labeling him a crybaby. And then there is the incident I will never forget. Before this, I was merely frightened of her and blamed myself for everything. But this experience planted the first seeds of hatred toward her in me. At the age of 10, my family was evicted by my grandparents. We left with nothing and were forced to live in a temporary and impoverished home. I will share more details about that later. The key point is that, during that time, my parents were extremely poor. I did not dare to ask them for anything. I was compelled to lie, writing all my subjects into an old sketchbook and using a piece of cardboard as a cover, hoping to save money for my family. But, as the saying goes, a needle concealed in a sack will eventually poke through. During a reading session in class, I ran out of pages in my sketchbook and had to write on my hand. She caught me and demanded I bring all my notebooks to her. Sitting at my desk, I felt humiliated as she flipped through each page, revealing my old drawings mixed with written notes to the entire class. I had no defense. It was my fault. I felt wretched. When she called me to her desk, I walked over with the intention of apologizing and she slapped me. How can I express it? Since my childhood, I had often been punished by my parents for misbehavior, but they never slapped me in the face or hit me in front of others, yet she dared. At that moment, I received a full slap in front of my classmates. My face turned to the left, my cheek burned, and it hurt, but I could not cry because I was too stunned. Before I could recover from my shock, she twisted my ear as if she wanted to detach it. Humiliation, anger, and fear engulfed me. She was the first person in my life to slap me in the face when I was 10 years old, on my left cheek at 9 a.m. on an autumn morning in 2017. I was traumatized, I was terrified, and I feared that if I told my family, she would harm me even worse. I did not want to be slapped in front of so many people again. When I graduated from elementary school and was preparing to enter middle school, during a farewell gathering, she delivered an emotional speech, and some of my classmates wept. I felt empty and despised her tears. My nightmare was finally over. As I grew older, I finally confided in my parents. They were speechless. My mother was furious and regretted not teaching me to stand up for myself sooner, regretting not teaching me that no one had the right to mistreat me, not even a teacher. One time, after returning from shopping, my mother told me she had accidentally encountered my former elementary school teacher. That shameless woman mentioned that on Teacher's Day, some of my old classmates had returned to visit, but she had not seen me, implying that I was an ungrateful person who had forgotten about my teachers. I found it absurd and revolting. I would prefer to bear that label than buy flowers for that woman. It remains a dark chapter in my past that fills me with anger when I recall it, but I will attempt not to waste my thoughts on such individuals. There are better people waiting for me. I never wish to see that teacher again. Story 6. Should I stop being friends? A close friend, 21F, and I, 21M, are currently navigating a challenging moment in our friendship. We met in school 3 years ago and formed an instant bond. Unfortunately, I introduced some drama into her life, which ultimately led to her feeling hurt. A few weeks later, we reconnected and returned even stronger. I developed significant feelings for her and decided to distance myself from the friendship. This was incredibly hard, but I managed to move on eventually. As summer arrived, we did not communicate much. I began dating someone else and only talked to her occasionally, just as regular friends. Things were going well. However, I soon found myself becoming closer to her again. Around this time, I ended my relationship, which I believe is unrelated to our situation. We started spending more time together, primarily studying for long hours. During the second summer, we maintained some contact, but it was limited. This past year, we were studying abroad and spent nearly every day together. I had developed a crush on her before our trip, and while away, we ended up sharing a drunken kiss. We discussed it and agreed that it would not happen again. She began facing emotional struggles, and I became her support system, always available for her. I was also dealing with some emotional challenges, and she consistently showed up for me. My feelings for her deepened, and our connection became tumultuous, with fluctuating weekends of communication. Despite this, we frequently found our way back to each other. I expressed my feelings to her 2 years ago and elaborated on why it was such a struggle for me. She acknowledged this and offered me chances to step back, but I assured her I was fine because I wanted to support her mental well-being. Eventually, it became overwhelming, and I told her I needed some space. It took a couple of days, but it was a hard time for both of us. We reconnected, but I fell into a depressive state. I couldn't stop thinking about her, feeling like she was just within reach but unattainable. Then we took another trip, during which we kissed again while drunk. The following day, we tried to get it out of our system while sober, holding hands, kissing, and essentially acting as though we were together. We spent another night together, but halfway through, we had an argument where hurtful things were said. After about a week, we became each other's emotional sanctuaries, spending our days together discussing our feelings. We dined, studied, and partied together. While we were affectionate when intoxicated, nothing serious transpired. We shared deeply personal thoughts and vowed to support each other always. In the meantime, I was struggling internally, torn between wanting to be there for her and needing to step away to heal from my feelings for her. When I confessed my emotions again, she bluntly rejected me. Regardless, our friendship seemed to strengthen. Once our study abroad experience concluded, we returned to the United States. Initially, our communication was limited to texts, but soon we were able to have long phone conversations every few days, usually at night, and I texted her throughout the day. We continued discussing our feelings. As school resumed, we spent entire days together, cuddling for hours. I attempted to kiss her but was rejected yet again. I reassured her that I was comfortable just being friends. For a week, things felt a bit awkward, but then our cuddling escalated. We met first thing in the morning and late at night to discuss our feelings. She mentioned that she would have been gone if it weren't for me, to which I reaffirmed my commitment that I would never leave her side. I was in anguish. She frequently asked if she was a burden to me, and I insisted she was not, as she genuinely was not. All I wanted was for my feelings to fade so that I could simply be her friend, but unfortunately, that did not happen. I felt like a burden to myself for lying to both her and me. Things began to take an odd turn. She would apologize whenever her boyfriend called, claiming she needed to use the restroom to speak with him. She allowed me to touch her and kiss her neck. I kept asking if she was comfortable with my actions. She insisted that she wanted me to. There was a moment when she indicated it was excessive and asked me to tone it down. When I probed for specifics, she was unsure. I encouraged her to communicate what was too much, assuring her that I would stop. I asked repeatedly, often multiple times within an hour. She mostly affirmed that everything was fine. There are many other minor details, but they follow similar patterns. I struggled with sleep, as she occupied my thoughts constantly. She was in a chaotic state, and I felt compelled to support her not out of obligation, but simply because I loved her. A couple of days ago, a mutual friend spoke with her about how we were hurting each other and that she needed to listen to her own feelings. When we discussed it, she admitted she was uncertain about what she wanted and explicitly stated that she did not want to date me. Then she mistakenly called me by her boyfriend's name. I completely shut down, left, and said I needed space. I expressed my feeling that she was manipulating me and required time alone to contemplate my next steps. I also clarified that I did not hold her accountable for anything. This situation was nobody's fault. She often expressed concern that she might be hurting me. During our emotional discussions, she sometimes made remarks that left me silent and hurt, particularly comments about the future or her boyfriend, highlighting her fears. Now, it has been roughly a day and a half, and I am caught between the desire to reach out to resolve our friendship and maintaining silence. I feel as though I am abandoning her, knowing she would never treat me this way. I made a promise to always support her, and now I find myself unable to do so. It pains me to think that I might be causing her hurt. What should I do? I apologize for the lengthy message. In summary, I have a close friend, 21F, of 3 years, and we have shared both physical and emotional intimacy. She is in a serious relationship with someone she has been dating for 6 years. I have previously confessed my feelings for her 3 times. Over the past month or two, I have lied about having moved on from these feelings. I communicated my need for space and expressed that supporting her was taking a toll on me. It hurts not to be there for her, especially when we both vowed to always be there for one another. What should I do?